you do? How do you do? How do you do? So nice to meet you, boys and girls. I am your host instrument, Clarence Clarinet. And today I'm going to introduce you to my very large and very important family, the woodwinds. My dear people, the woodwinds are among the most important of all orchestral families. One of the first families of the orchestra, you might say. Well, I say. Now, before we meet the rest of the family, I am going to explain to you just what it is that woodwind instruments do and how they do it. Of course, as you may already have guessed, the key to our kind of music is in the two words wood and wind. We woodwinds are made out of hollow wooden tubes or pipes. When you blow into a tube, you are forcing air through it, making the air move back and forth very quickly. This quick movement back and forth is called vibration, and all sound, including music, is caused by vibration. In case you're wondering what the difference is between sound and music, here it is. That is sound. This is music. In early times, man found that he could make that pleasing sound we call music by hitting something solid so it vibrated like this. Or plucking a string so it vibrated like this. Or finally, by blowing through a tube so that the air inside it vibrated like this. He found that some vibrations sounded high to his ears and others sounded low. To make this idea clearer, years later, the word pitch, which means height, was used to describe musical sounds. A sound that seemed to be low was called a low-pitched sound. Listen. While a sound that seemed to be high was called a high-pitched sound. Listen. Pitch is really a matter of time. Maybe I ought to say a matter of times. Oh, you don't get the joke. Well, what I mean is that the pitch of a musical sound comes from the number of times per second it vibrates. In fact, the higher the pitch, the more vibrations per second, and the lower the pitch, the fewer vibrations per second. That's easy to understand, isn't it? But did you ever notice that instruments sound different from each other, even when they're playing the exact same pitch or note? Listen. This is because each tone we make is not just one main tone, but many different tones all put together. And the combination of tones made by each instrument is quite different. Then, too, each instrument is different in size, shape, material, and in the way in which it produces sound. The finish of an instrument, the shellac, the quality and kind of wood or metal it is made of, all these things affect the exact sound of the instrument. If you listen very carefully, you can soon learn to know the sound of each different instrument the moment you hear it. Now, take me, for instance. The air inside me vibrates in two waves. It vibrates all together, and it vibrates in separate parts. But these parts vibrate differently from those of any other instrument. Naturally, my shape, size, and structure all give me a much different sound from any of the others. The vibrating air inside me acts very much like the vibrating string of a piano. The shorter the air column, the higher the note. In us woodwinds, the air column can be made shorter or longer by opening certain holes in the tube of the instrument. When a player wants to play low notes, he opens only the lowest holes. To play the high notes, he opens the holes toward the top. Well, now that you have an idea of how we work, let me introduce you to the major members of our woodwind family. Myself, the clarinet, you already know. And here's Uncle Oboe and his brother English horn. Then old grandfather bassoon, then cousin flute and his little brother piccolo. Now, as I just mentioned, many of us are played with something called a reed. The reed is a thin strip of wood which fits onto a mouthpiece. When the player puts the mouthpiece to his lips and blows it, the air makes the reed vibrate against a hole in the mouthpiece. This same air travels down into the tube of the instrument and vibrates inside it to make a musical sound. But it's not as simple as it seems. It takes a great deal of practice to produce just the right amount of pressure and air to create lovely music. We clarinets are usually made of wood, although sometimes of metal. With the flute, blowing harder makes the tone produced jump 8 notes or 1 full octave higher. But with us clarinets, when you blow harder, a special key is pressed to make our tone jump higher. This strange way of ours gives us a great range. As a result, our low notes are warm and rich. While our high tones can be very bright and hard-sounding. Johann Christian Denner of Nuremberg, Germany, first developed the clarinet back in the 1690s, adapting it from an old shepherd's pipe. Throughout the years, we clarinets have been much improved, and we now have a greater range of tone than any other woodwind instrument. I don't want to boast, but this means that just about everyone wants to use us. The great composers use us in symphonies and as solo instruments. And we're very useful in marching bands or jazz combos like this one. This strange-looking fellow is my brother, the bass clarinet. He plays 8 notes lower than I do, but he's really very nice. Oh, here's cousin flute, the one exception to our woodwind family rules, that we are made of wood and played with a reed. Flute is a funny fellow, for you see, today he is neither made of wood nor played with a reed. But once, long ago, flutes, which are a very old instrument indeed, were made of wood, and their tone is very close to that of the other woodwinds. The flute is one of the most widely used of all musical instruments. Very early flutes were made of wood and blown into at one end. The very first flutes were made of bone or bamboo and often used in magical primitive ceremonies. In 1847, a German flutist named Theobald Boehm greatly improved the flute by better spacing of the holes, by inventing the keys, and by making his flutes of silver. The modern flute is usually made of silver or gold. It is a hollow cylindrical tube with a mouth hole. There are 13 tone holes which are covered by keys or little lids on springs that can be pressed down or released to change notes, and several other holes are provided for finger movements. Today, flutes are made of metal rather than wood to meet the requirements of modern music, which calls for a big, bright sound which can be heard over and above the sound of a large orchestra. The wooden flute has a more mellow sound which does not carry as well. So, although the wood is gone, the wind remains, and we have kept flute in the woodwind family. The modern flute player holds his instrument sideways and blows across a hole near the end. This sideways flute is called the transverse flute. The player's breath, striking the sharp edge of the blowhole, starts the air column moving. The harder he blows his breath, the higher the sound he produces. Listen. Those low sounds took just a little bit of breath, but by the time the player got to those high sounds, he was working pretty hard. The flute is often used in opera as an accompanying instrument in duets with sopranos. The flute usually leads, doing rapid, intricate runs which the singer follows in perfect imitation. Flute's little brother is the piccolo. His name means the little one in Italian, and considering he's half the size of flute, it's a good name. Though he's small, you can't ignore the piccolo. He's got a high, bright sound that cuts right through a band or an orchestra playing full blast. The piccolo plays one octave higher than the regular flute. Listen. There is another kind of flute you may have heard of. This is the fife, a small transverse flute with a clear and very piercing tone. The fife was used mostly for playing in military bands and along with a drum for giving signals during battles. Today, there are still a few fife and drum corps which appear in parades. One of the older members of my family is Great Uncle Recorder. He's a kind of flute made of wood with a soft, mellow tone. A great deal of charming music was written for the recorder when the first Queen Elizabeth ruled England, and ladies and gentlemen of the court spent many evenings playing recorders of various sizes and pitches. Then, the recorder was forgotten for many years until modern times. Today, he is being played again. I want you to meet my second cousin, Oboe. He's the black sheep of the family, you know. He's very hard to get along with, and part of the reason is that he's got a double reed mouthpiece instead of only one, like most of us woodwinds. Playing the oboe is a very frustrating thing because it takes very little breath to make music with the oboe, and the player is always having to hold back. If he blows just a little too hard, out comes a terrible squeak. That's why some people have called Cousin Oboe an ill wind that nobody blows good. Well, anyway, I thought it was funny. Even though oboe is very hard to play, I think you'll agree he really has a lovely voice. Listen. Today, the oboe is a straight wooden pipe on which are arranged finger holes and keys. He has a double reed inserted at the top and a slightly flaring bell. He is a very difficult instrument to tune, but his tone is so pure that all the other instruments in the orchestra take their pitch from him. The oboe is one of the very oldest of musical instruments. He was first used thousands of years ago and has been known by many different names throughout history. Some hundreds of years ago, the oboe had started to be made in different styles with different tones. There were low bass instruments and high soprano instruments. The soprano instruments were called by the French haut-bois, or high wood. The Italians then changed the words haut-bois into the word oboe, the word we use today. The great Italian operatic composer Rossini was very fond of the oboe as an instrument and wrote many, many rich solos for it. One of his closest friends was a great oboist. People used to wonder why Rossini's oboe solos always came right at the beginning of an opera and then not again until well into the second act. The answer to the riddle lay in Rossini's huge appetite. He was a very fat man and could not bear the thought of conducting an entire long opera without a little snack to carry him through. So Rossini would write lovely solos for his friend the oboist and then send him out for some bologna sandwiches, of which he was very fond. The oboist had plenty of time to get back to his place before he played again, while Rossini proceeded to conduct with one hand and eat with the other. Listen. Uncle English Horn is very much like Cousin Oboe. He, too, is a double reed instrument and is so long that the mouthpiece had to be bent back so that the player could reach all the keys. Strangely enough, he is neither a horn nor English. In French, the word for angle sounds very much like the word for English, anglais. French musicians changed the name from angled horn to English horn, and finally, the name was used by musicians everywhere. He really has a lovely tone. Last but not least, there's grandfather bassoon and great-grandfather double bassoon. They're both really nothing more than bass oboes, each playing lower than the other, and they really are a merry pair of old woodwinds. bassoon especially enjoys clowning around, and many composers take advantage of his humorous, dry tone. Listen. Like all good things, our little visit must come to an end. Thank you for allowing me, Clarence Clarinet, to introduce you to my family. Don't forget to listen to us whenever you hear music. We'll be there.